All right, everybody. Good morning. I hope you're having a really good day. We're going to talk a little bit about American history, a very important time that really changed America and the world. I'm talking about World War II. Let's look at this stuff here. World War II, a turning point in U.S. and world history. One, it brought America out of the Great Depression. We were in the middle of a long, horrible economic downturn that lasted 10 years, and World War II brought us out. Two, it created a new world order. Instead of a Europe that was essentially fighting itself, it became a Europe that was divided up and had guns pointed at each other. We can talk about that another time. Three, the U.S. becomes the leader of the world. Now, in this situation, what happens? 1939, Germany invades Poland under the leadership of a very cruel, horrible, absolutely insane dictator named Adolf Hitler, who killed people for no good reason. The man was sick with power, and he took the first step. 1939, invaded Poland. 1940 to 41, Blitzkrieg. Blitzkrieg was called Lightning War, where the military airplanes would fly over a city and just bomb and bomb and bomb and bomb and bomb. Horrible nightmares. Cities across Europe were being just totally devastated by bombing and nonstop bombing. That was called Blitzkrieg. Even places like London, England were bombed. Then, December 7th, 1941, a day has been said will go down in infamy. That was the words of President Roosevelt when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. It is said that the admiral of the Japanese fleet, when he heard that that was the command to go bomb Pearl Harbor, he was quoted as saying, "We have awoken a sleeping giant." And oh, was that true? As a result of the bombing of Pearl Harbor, the U.S. not only declared war and entered the War of Europe. You got to remember, we had just been in the middle of a depression. We didn't want anything to do with Europe. We pulled out of that real quick. And as a result, factories started pumping out machinery like never before. The boom was almost immediate. We created more military materiel in that time than ever before. We entered the war in December 7th. Some of the historic people at that time, Admiral Nimitz, who led the Pacific Fleet. He was a man who was very instrumental in submarine warfare, but he led us to victory in the Pacific. Oveta Hobby was a wonderful Texas lady who was the first director of the Women's Army Corps. That's right. Women were involved with the military in that time, a separate corps, but they were there to support the men as the men were on the battlefield. The Women's Army Corps became a very, very critical part of the war effort. And then there was Audie Murphy. I threw him in on the side. Audie Murphy was born here in Texas. Audie Murphy became a movie actor, but he became known as a great World War II. We invaded Europe and we stopped the Germans. 1945, the atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. In 1945, August 7th, Japan surrenders. Friends, those events in 1945 stopped a horrible war machine. Now, what's interesting, during this time, there were two sides. They were called the Allies and the Axis powers. The Axis powers were Germany, and Italy, Germany, and for some reason I'm forgetting the last one. Italy. Anyway, There were three. Remember them in a few minutes. Then on the other side were the Allies, and that included the United States, Australia, United Kingdom, France. There was Canada. I think the Netherlands were involved. And for some reason, I went blank on it. There were three Axis powers: Germany, Italy, and I can't remember the third one. I apologize. But anyway, Axis versus Allied powers. Now, this was the way history was unfolding for us. And that's what happened. 1945, it all ended. But the world would be changed forever. Because as a result, the four different parts of Europe were divided up. The Soviet Union had entered in on the side of the United States and as an ally. And the Soviet Union lost 24 million people in that. Because they lost the most amount of people in that conflict of any country. And they got the opportunity to have part of the Eastern Bloc. It was divided into several sectors. The Eastern Bloc nations, as they called them. That was the Soviet Union. It was also called the Iron Curtain, the communist side. And I'm still trying to think. You had Germany, Japan. That's what it was. I knew I'd remember it. Germany, Japan, and Italy. They were the Axis powers. Soviet Union, United States, United Kingdom, France, Australia, Canada, Netherlands, a couple other nations, they made up the Allied powers. After the war, at the end of the war, the leaders of both sides divided up the European peninsula into Eastern Europe and Western Europe. And as a result, from that point forward, for about 40 years, we had something called the Cold War. But that's something for another discussion. As you can see, from 1939 to 1945, actually before 1939, Hitler was rising to power during the 1930s and getting his war machine going. But it was from 1939 to 1945 that the world was in the middle of some major terror. And fortunately, America stepped in and with help from the Allies was able to stop the huge devastation that Hitler was involved with. That's right, folks. That is a quick summary of World War II, a war that changed the nation, changed our nation, and changed the world. See you next time.